For decades, people in the gospel world had lifted their hands and cried tears of hope to the songs of Bishop Marvin Sapp. His voice had healed hearts, and his words had become the sound of strength for millions. Songs like Never Would Have Made It and The Best in Me were not just music, they were messages of faith that carried people through their darkest days. But you won't believe that behind all those shining lights, there was a silence no one ever heard. While Marvin stood on stages across the world, smiling and preaching about endurance and faith, there was a quiet pain growing inside his own home, a story that was never meant to be told. Let me tell you, this was not the kind of silence that came from peace. It was the silence of secrets, the kind that presses down so hard it almost becomes part of the walls themselves. Marvin's image had always been spotless: a bishop, a father, a widower who raised his children alone after losing his wife Melinda in 2010. It was the perfect story of strength and faith. The world called him a man of God, a symbol of survival. But inside that perfect picture, something was missing. His daughter, whose name had almost disappeared from public view, had lived in the shadow of his legacy. This is how her story began. Behind smiles at church dinners, quiet nods at award shows, and polite waves in photos where her voice never mattered. She was the bishop's daughter, but never her own person. Everyone knew Marvin Sapp. Almost no one knew her. People whispered. Some fans wondered why she never appeared with her father at gospel events. Others thought maybe she just preferred privacy. But here's the shocking part. It wasn't privacy she wanted, it was freedom. From the earliest years of her life, she had carried the heavy weight of being the bishop's child. Teachers at school looked at her differently. Church members treated her like she was part of the ministry instead of just a young girl trying to find her own way. Every step she took was watched. Every word she said was measured. This is where it gets interesting, because even when she tried to speak, her words never reached the world. According to people close to the family, she once broke down in the pastor's office late one night. She told her father she couldn't handle being paraded at church events anymore. She wanted to be herself, not just his daughter. Marvin, as the story goes, placed his hand on her shoulder and said softly, "We carry this together. The world is watching us. Your silence is not weakness, it's protection." But that silence became her prison. It meant burying every emotion, every struggle, every personal dream under the weight of image. What makes this story different? It's that her pain wasn't just hidden, it was silenced in the name of ministry. By the time she grew older, people no longer saw her as a woman with her own identity. She had become a symbol of her father's success, a quiet background figure in a story that wasn't hers. Destiny took an unexpected turn when she realized that the life everyone admired had cost her the one thing she wanted most: her voice. She began writing journals late at night in secret. Some pages were prayers, some were questions, and some were quiet cries for freedom. She wanted to speak, but there was no place safe enough to do it. Behind the smile of Bishop Marvin Sapp's home, there was a daughter drowning in silence. And though she hid it well, cracks were starting to show. The world still saw the bishop standing tall, preaching, and singing songs of hope. But in his house, the story was different. This was not just a daughter rebelling. This was a woman slowly breaking under the weight of perfection. The pressure of legacy had started to turn into chains, and soon something would have to break. As the years passed, Marvin Sapp's ministry grew stronger, but the distance between him and his daughter became deeper. What the world didn't see was how the glow of the pulpit slowly dimmed the light inside his own home. His daughter had learned how to smile on cue, how to clap at the right time, and how to say, "Amen," even when her heart was breaking. You won't believe how much she had hidden behind that calm face. Every sermon about strength reminded her of the weakness she could never show. Every time her father sang about faith, she wondered if faith meant losing herself just to keep everyone else proud. She had spent her whole life being quiet, but silence has a way of growing heavy. It sits in your chest until one day it starts to choke you. Let me tell you, there came a point when she couldn't keep it in anymore. Rumors say she tried to open up to someone close in the church, maybe a youth mentor or family friend. But every time she tried, someone reminded her of who her father was. They told her to stay strong, to be the example, to protect the family's image. That word, image, followed her everywhere. It was like a chain wrapped around her voice. This is where it gets interesting because one day she simply vanished from public sight. Fans began noticing she wasn't showing up to church events, not even at her father's side during the big conferences or award ceremonies. Some blogs whispered that she had gone abroad to study. But here is the shocking part. That was just the story told to keep people quiet. The truth was much darker. She had been sent away, quietly, to live with her aunt for almost 2 years. And those 2 years weren't for school. They were for recovery. Behind closed doors, Marvin's daughter had fallen into a battle no one in the church pews could have imagined. She struggled with pain, confusion, and the weight of expectations that had crushed her since childhood. What makes this story different? It wasn't about fame destroying her. It was about silence destroying her spirit. She was fighting an internal storm while the world still believed she was doing fine. During her recovery, she wrote in her journal, "I wish I could just be Marvin Sapp's daughter without having to be Marvin Sapp's testimony." That line, raw and heartbreaking, showed just how lost she felt. Destiny took an unexpected turn when she realized her own family didn't see her pain as pain. They saw it as risk. Risk to reputation, risk to ministry, risk to the brand. According to one insider, a family meeting turned tense when she cried out saying, "You all don't even see me. You see the bishop's house, the brand, the ministry, but not me." The room went silent, and for a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, Marvin's voice broke the silence. He said quietly, "This family's survival depends on discipline. If you tear it down, everything I've built will crumble." That moment changed everything. It was the night she realized she would always have to choose between being herself and being her father's daughter. From that day on, something inside her hardened. She stopped trying to be understood. Instead, she began to plan. She told herself, "One day, I'll speak my truth, and when I do, the world will finally listen." No one knew when that day would come. No one even believed it would. But the silence she had carried for so long was slowly turning into fire, and that fire was getting ready to burn through everything that had kept her quiet. Years went by, and though the world believed the Sapp family had moved forward, beneath the surface, the storm was only getting stronger. Marvin's ministry continued to flourish, his music still filled churches, and his reputation as a devoted father remained untouched. But his daughter had grown tired of pretending. The silence that once protected her had now become unbearable. You won't believe how long she carried that secret, waiting for the moment when she could finally breathe. Let me tell you, it wasn't fame or bitterness that pushed her to speak. It was exhaustion. A lifetime of smiling while feeling invisible had finally reached its end. This is how the truth began to unfold. On her 60th birthday, surrounded by nothing but the sound of her own thoughts, she made a decision that would change everything. She sat in front of her phone camera, tears in her eyes, and pressed record. Her voice trembled at first, but then it grew steady, almost fearless. "People saw my father's music and his sermons," like she said, "but they never saw me. I was raised in a house where image meant survival. I learned early that speaking out was not welcome. Those words would soon travel farther than she ever imagined." But here's the shocking part. She hadn't planned to make it public. It was meant to be a private video testimony shared in a small, closed Facebook group of women who had lived under the shadow of powerful men. But destiny took an unexpected turn. Someone inside that group shared the video. Within hours, it spread across social media like wildfire. The gospel world froze. Church mothers gasped. Fans began to flood comment sections asking, "Is this real? Is this Marvin Sapp's daughter?" Some defended her courage. Others accused her of betrayal. The internet was split in half. This is where it gets interesting, because as her words reached millions, more than just hearts began to shake. Old memories resurfaced. Former church members started whispering about moments they had seen tension behind the pulpit or felt tension in Marvin's tone when family questions came up. Rumors that had been buried for years started crawling back into daylight. And what makes this story different? It wasn't just gossip this time. It was evidence. Emotional, raw, and painfully real. People close to the family said Marvin was devastated. One of his oldest friends, Jackie Patillo, reportedly called him the night the video leaked. Marvin's voice, usually powerful and steady, was quiet and broken. "I did everything I knew to protect her," he said. Everything. But those who knew the truth understood. Protection had come at a cost. For years, that protection had also been silence. Silence that swallowed her pain, her identity, and her voice. The craziest part, within a day, blogs picked up her story. Podcasts replayed her testimony with dramatic music. YouTube channels began posting titles like "Marvin Sapp's Family Secret Finally Exposed." And while the internet debated who was right or wrong, Marvin's daughter stayed silent again. But this time, it wasn't fear keeping her quiet. It was peace. She had finally said what she needed to say. And though her truth had shaken the entire gospel community, she wasn't running from it anymore. For Marvin, though, things were different. Friends said he didn't sleep for days. He stopped taking calls, avoided interviews, and even skipped a few public appearances. For a man whose entire life was built on words, he suddenly had none. And maybe that was the hardest part, realizing that the voice that once inspired millions had somehow silenced the one voice that mattered most to him. The aftermath of her revelation hit harder than anyone expected. Overnight, the Sapp family went from being gospel royalty to the center of every online discussion. Marvin's supporters rushed to defend him, saying he was a good man, a faithful father, and that every family has its struggles. But you won't believe how many others began questioning the image they had admired for so long. Let me tell you, fans who once sang along to "Never Would Have Made It" now listen to it with a different kind of ache, wondering if the man behind the song had truly lived the faith he preached. This is how the story began to turn into something much bigger than just one family's pain. The church world was shaken. Pastors who once called Marvin a brother started to distance themselves. Some quietly deleted old photos and avoided making statements. But here is the shocking part. The controversy didn't stop at emotional wounds. It began to pull old rumors out of the shadows. Allegations of disagreements within the Lighthouse Full Life Center Church, where Marvin once pastored, resurfaced. Some claimed the tension between him and his daughter had spilled into church matters long ago. Others whispered that her emotional breakdown had nearly led to a lawsuit against the church itself. Nothing was confirmed, but the whispers grew louder with each passing day. This is where it gets interesting, because the conversation that began about one daughter's pain soon turned into a mirror held up to the entire gospel community. People started asking tough questions. How many other pastors' kids were carrying their own hidden scars? How many had been silenced in the name of protecting ministry? What makes this story different? It wasn't just about Marvin Sapp anymore. It was about a truth too many had ignored, that behind the image of holiness, real people can still be hurting. The craziest part came a few days later. According to a relative who attended a private family gathering, Marvin and his daughter finally sat face to face after the video went viral. There were no cameras, no choir, no crowd, just a father and daughter sitting across from each other in silence. Marvin's eyes were filled with exhaustion. He finally said, I thought I could carry this ministry and carry you too. But maybe I was wrong. His daughter, with tears running down her face, whispered, I never asked you to carry me, Daddy. I just wanted you to see me. That moment, raw and painful, said everything words could not. Destiny took an unexpected turn that day. The man who had spent a lifetime teaching others how to heal had finally been forced to face the brokenness within his own home. Whether the world would forgive him or not didn't matter as much anymore. What mattered was whether his family could ever find peace again. Some say Marvin has been spending more time away from the spotlight, avoiding interviews, and focusing on personal reflection. Others believe he's preparing a public statement, but until now, nothing has been confirmed. Still, one thing became clear: the silence that had covered this family for decades was finally broken. And once the truth is spoken, it can never be buried again. Her story, told at 60, reminded people everywhere that it's never too late to speak your truth, even if it shakes the ground beneath your feet. As one fan wrote online, if Marvin Sapp's daughter can find her voice at 60, maybe I can too. So now the world watches, waiting to see if this will bring healing or heartbreak. Will Marvin step forward with honesty, or will he retreat into the safety of the pulpit once again? No one knows for sure. But one thing is certain: the gospel world will never look at the Sapp family the same way again. The music, the sermons, the legacy, all now carry a shadow of truth that can't be ignored. The silence is gone, the story is out, and what happens next, only time will tell